Welcome, everybody, to episode 46 of Generation Jihad. This is the long-delayed episode 46 of Generation Jihad. I am, of course, Tom Joscelyn. I'm here again with my colleague, Bill Roggio. Bill.
Hello, everyone, again.
We are senior fellows at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and we run FDD's Long War Journal. Several people have contacted us to say that there's sound issues, that sometimes we sound too loud and too soft. Look, folks, we're working on it. We're trying to figure out what that is. As Bill will tell you, and Bill has more knowledge of than just about anybody other than my wife, I am a technophobe. So anything technical or anything doing with computers, I am worthless. Bill, is that about right?
Tom, I think a more accurate description is you're a walking EMP. If it's mechanical, or I'm sorry, if it's electronic, Tom is pretty much assured to destroy it somehow or another. So yeah, that's pretty much accurate, though. You are you fear it because you destroy it.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised even that we can get the Zoom link to work for this recording.
I know, right?
Something that everybody and my kids are using Zoom every day, and I'm surprised that I could get it to work on my computer. So, okay, so that's our little beginning to episode 46. So we're going to do just a quick roundup just to get back in the rhythm of recording and getting episodes out. We've got more episodes in the pipeline, of course. We're going to be releasing these more regularly now coming in the coming weeks. We're going to have some more guests. But I guess the first thing we'll start off with real quick is just a quick update on the war in Afghanistan. Bill, President Biden has reportedly considered trying to extend the troop presence in Afghanistan past the May 1st deadline, which looks like DoD is not going to be able to get out by May 1st anyway, for logistical reasons. But basically, that he's considered a 3 to 6 month extension or something like that beyond May 1st. What's the point of that, Bill? I don't understand. What's the point of that?
Yeah. So the only point of it is because the U.S. hasn't begun its withdrawal, right? And no, look, I think, there's a couple issues here. There's the logistical issue of U.S. leaving, right? And given that it hasn't been preparing for this withdrawal, the U.S. military, because of the change of administration and the review of Afghanistan policy, they just physically can't withdraw its forces and get the large equipment out in now or under, I guess we're at 30 days now. It's May 1st. So that's one issue. But really what I think the Biden administration is trying to do here is they'll mask, the logistical issues because they're trying to get an actual settlement between the Taliban and Afghan civil society with the Afghan government. It's pushed a new peace proposal, so-called peace proposal, where the Taliban will come into a power sharing arrangement. There'll be elections, and the Constitution is the basis for this. All of the things that the Taliban has rejected over the past, and the Biden administration, I think they can move this along in the course of 3 or 6 months. I think that's wildly misguided. I know you agree, Tom, given all of everything that the Taliban has publicly stated, that they won't accept. They refuse to share power. They won't accept the Afghan Constitution. It's a satanic, and this is their own word, satanic Western construct that's being imposed on the Afghan people through, the imperialist and satanic West, and et cetera, et cetera. These are issues we've discussed numerous times on the podcast. I'm sure we're going to go into it in more depth today. But so you have that issue again. So to summarize, you got the issue that the U.S. military can't do it, but the Biden administration is probably going to use that as cover to try to come to some type of settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government, which isn't going to happen. And then, Tom, I'm not going to jump the gun here. I know you're going to want to discuss this. The Taliban, if they do agree to an extension, they're going to have they're going to want their pound of flesh in order to make this happen. And it's probably a good move for the Taliban. If they were smart, they would accept some form of extension, and they can get some additional things from the U.S. and the Afghan government.
Yeah, let's break this down into two pieces just to emphasize these again. Now, one of the things I've been doing is going through the commentary and just making notes of the people who are pretending that the Taliban is willing to come to terms with the Afghan government and is willing to share power and is willing to do something other than restore its Islamic emirate. I think part of one of the things I've noticed is that there's all these commentators or analysts or supposed experts on Afghanistan who I've noticed on social media who don't like us for one reason or another. We have a fair share of fans too, of course, but yeah, most of the people I didn't even hear of until I see them trolling us on Twitter or something. But one of the reasons I think that for that is that, look, I think they're full of it, right? I think there's an awful lot of people have pretended that the Taliban is about something other than its Islamic Emirate. Even though it calls itself the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the U.S. couldn't get them to back off of that, even when signing a servile withdrawal agreement in Doha of February 2020. They called themselves the Islamic Emirate over and over again. You and I have discussed the crazy language that the State Department put in there to say, which every time they had the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the State Department would say, but we don't actually recognize this, okay.
I think it's like, I counted 16 times in there. And Tom, that language actually occupies about a third to a half a page of the actual agreement. I went and looked at this and I was like, this agreement's nothing to begin with. And then we have this repetitive language that refuses to recognize what the Taliban calls it, occupying probably somewhere between a sixth to an eighth of the document. It's crazy.
Look, again, we're laughing, but I mean, obviously, the stuff isn't funny overall. I mean, there are all sorts of lives on the line. It's just the whole process here is a joke. And I just was noticing, there was a New York Times article about, I forget who authored it, but basically the front part of the piece was the Taliban thinks that they already won, which we agree with. They do think they already won, and then they had some supposed experts cited in it as saying, well, there's somewhere between democracy and the Islamic Emirate that they're willing to come to some sort of power sharing arrangement. I'm thinking to myself, first of all, define that. What does that government look like? I mean, this is you've got some new sort of institution that they're going to resurrect, some sort of new form of government that they're going to invent now in 2021. Yeah, I don't think so. And second of all, I don't know of any evidence. These people that write about this, that pretend like the Taliban wants to do something other than restore its Islamic Emirate, I don't know of any evidence, certainly no publicly available evidence, that the Taliban is actually willing to do that. I mean, all the evidence that you and I track Taliban media all the time, I mean, they call themselves the Islamic Emirate. They tell their fighters for 20 years now, or going on 20 years, that they want to resurrect the Islamic Emirate. They fight like they're resurrecting the Islamic Emirate. They have a shadow government, which is in place to be the shadow government of the Islamic Emirate. I mean, what are people talking about? Like, I don't even know what they're talking about.
Tom, 7 days after that deal was signed with the U.S., it issued a fatwa, a religious statement in English. It's not like they were hiding it, that stated that the only acceptable government is the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and its emir, Mullah Habibatullah Akhundzada, as the leader of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It couldn't, and then its statements subsequently have been consistent, and it's fighting, as you noted, it's fighting, its actions matches its deeds. So yeah, I don't know what people are talking about.
Words, yeah,
I'm sorry. The deeds match the words. I don't, look, these so-called experts aren't. They're hearing whispers from officials, maybe Taliban, maybe some Taliban behind the scenes are whispering to someone. But that's meaningless, because look at what the Taliban says when it comes to the Doha Agreement. Look at what's on paper. It's what's on paper that matters. You sign this agreement, live up to the agreement. That's the Taliban's consistent statement. Whenever the U.S. talks about stupid things like reduction in violence, not in the agreement, Taliban doesn't care about it. Taliban doesn't acknowledge it. And so look, this is fantasy. And I know what that something between the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and democracy. Tom, I think I figured this out. This is the mythical unicorn moderate Taliban.
Yeah.
Right? That's that's something that just doesn't exist. That's what it's wish casting. We think, not we, you and I don't, but these so-called experts and U.S. officials who want this. They have a dream that there can be some type of something in between, and there is a moderate Taliban, but show me a moderate Taliban. I'd like to see one.
All this just brings up, something you and I talk about personally is I would love a way to bet against all this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It bothers me that we have no way of betting against this idiocy, because this is really, really ignorant. I mean, it's just,
Wow, Tom, maybe we need to
We need a betting market in jihadi world.
start up a foreign policy betting website.
Maybe that's the way to go. But
damn it! Did we just give someone an idea here?
I don't know, but look, I mean, our wager is very clear. If you think the Taliban is about anything other than the Islamic Emirate, yeah, well, good luck to you. You mentioned Habatullah Akhundzada. 2 things on him. One, of course, his title is Emir of the Faithful, which is the title used by a supposed proto-caliph. It's the title that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, his followers, gave him, and then, of course, his successor uses. This is not exactly the same title as like Minister of Border Security or something like that, right? I mean, this isn't the Interior Minister of a new Afghan government. Habatullah Akhundzada, the idea, one of the things that we saw, our sources told us, was there was this idea floated that Habatullah Akhundzada was going to go to Turkey and was going to join hands with Ashraf Ghani and going to accept some sort of religious ministerial post in a new Afghan government, because that's all he cares about. As long as he has a say over religious matters, he's fine, right? I mean, if there are people that actually believe this, right, then again, I'd like to be able to bet against them. But 2, it just shows again why this war was lost and why the U.S. has absolutely no idea what it's even looking at.
Yeah, Tom, and guess what? That we would have already have won that bet, because the Taliban spokesman, I can't remember which one, he came out and stated, he's not needed there. If we send our
of course
deputy,
not show him.
Right, if we send our the head of our political office, or the if we send this guy or this guy, it'll be sufficient. He represents him, and no way. So yeah, we could. Problem with this betting, we'd be killing this market. But I'd hope a lot of these idiots probably wouldn't take up their own bet, Tom. So we'd be betting against them.
But the thing is that our sources said there were actually people trafficking this nonsense.
Yeah.
And you got to be kidding me. I mean, first of all, it totally fun. I mean, I don't want to give this too much credence because it is just so stupid on its face. But part of the issue is that it does show a misunderstanding of what their actual religious beliefs are, because there is no separating the religious beliefs from their political beliefs. It's not like you can have a religious ministry that's run by the Taliban and political affairs are some sort of mixed bag. It doesn't work that way, right? I mean, their whole belief system, which they adhere to after all these years, is that they're going to enforce their religious system, their version of Sharia, on the Afghan populace, and that involves politics. It involves controlling the political apparatus in a totalitarian, authoritarian manner. You can't get away. You can't escape that. So, look, all these people are out there. You have all these people who are betting on the idea that the Taliban may be willing to agree to something other than Islamic Emirate. I'm keeping notes for future reference. You and I have talked about writing a book. We're going to have a whole chapter, I think, on this. We have to, about how so many people got this wrong and misdiagnosing the Taliban. I think we need to pound that home for posterity, for history's sake.
Yeah, I concur, Tom. I mean, it is, after all, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It's not the, secular Emirate of Afghanistan.
And by the way, on Islamic Emirate is, of course, one principality or one state in what?
The global caliphate.
Right. And so the idea, this is part of the whole, the whole idea that Taliban is a purely nationalist force can be debunked myriad ways, plenty of ways. But, it's
the name they give themselves, not the name we've given them.
Right.
And they understand the religious meaning behind Emirate and Caliphate.
Emir of the Faithful.
Emir of the Faithful. Right. Yep, exactly. Yeah. These things have very specific, very religious meaning to them. And they don't willy-nilly cast that, call Mullah Habibatullah Akhundzada the Emir al-Mu'minin, or call it the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It's very specific. And this is, instead, what we have is Western policymakers and Western so-called experts pressing Western ideas upon the Taliban. It doesn't work that way. And that's why we've lost this war.
Trying to view the Taliban through a Western lens and pretend that there's socioeconomics that can explain everything away. And if we just look at them through a pseudo-intellectual, Western intellectual lens, then we can explain everything, and it just doesn't work.
We can pay them off. We can negotiate with them.
We heard that. We heard that. We heard that we could pay them off, right? We heard that.
Right.
We heard a version of that was floated in U.S. government circles.
Yeah, if we just paid off a handful of Taliban leaders, they'll all come to our side. Yeah, and everything will be fine. Like, those guys wouldn't end up dead, every single one of them that took American money, right? I mean, this is just absolute idiocy that we deal with day in and day out. That chapter, when we do write that, it's not going to be very forgiving on our Taliban apologist friends out there.
No. So here's the other part of this story is that as part of this proposed extension, maybe a possibility, Tolo News reported that the U.S. the Taliban may be willing to consider a 3-month extension in exchange for, and here's what we predicted all along, all of the 7,000 Taliban jihadis who are in prison in Afghanistan being released, and delisting from the UN's terrorist list, the blacklist from the UN maintains that makes it difficult for them to fundraise and travel and that sort of thing.
Which, by the way, Tom, this was supposed to happen as part of the first part of the deal. Too.
Well, no, the first part of the deal was purely to consider it. If you read the language, it's just
that's true.
The U.S. was going to evaluate. The U.S. was going to evalluate this.
Right. They want to close this, right? They want
to now go back to that and say, well, you said you would evaluate it, and now you're staying past May 1st, and I mean, this is all gibberish. It's all nonsense. But the idea that you're going to give, if any genius comes up with the idea of actually doing this, of actually giving in, the U.S. is in the concession mode, of course, when it comes to this type of diplomacy, which is why I've called it servile diplomacy. You go in looking to get, a bad deal, basically, give up as much as they can up front. I can't believe anybody would actually consider this. Like, why would you give the Taliban 7,000? Some percentage of those are going to be back in the battlefield right away. In fact, of the previous release, there was a previous release of, I think it was 5,000 prisoners under the February 2020 Doha deal. The Afghan government reportedly rearrested hundreds of them back on the battlefield after they were supposedly these assurances that they weren't going to go back to fight. Of course, they did. Big surprise there. A good portion of them anyway.
It was estimated that at least
600.
60% had returned to the battlefield. Now, they detained hundreds, but they have estimated that they believe that 60%.
There you go. I mean,
so we're talking 3,000 fighters at a minimum returning to the battlefield. When the Afghan government is already being hard pressed, it's in a defensive mode right now. It's in a shell mode. U.S. air support has significantly decreased. I wrote this up a couple of weeks ago. The Taliban is withdrawing from military checkposts, from military bases.
The Afghan government is withdrawing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Afghan military and police are withdrawing from bases, checkposts. So you're gonna flood the battlefield with several thousand more, in addition to the several thousand that you had freed, while the Afghan government's on its heels, and then think that this is going to lead to peace. Yeah, I got a bridge to sell you.
I mean, wow. I mean, I don't know that the U.S. is seriously considering this, but here's the bottom line.
And the U.S. would do this in a second. Will the Afghan government consider?
Well, I was just
because they're the ones that.
Well, I don't know what the U.S. is seriously considering. I don't know. This is in Tolo News. It was reported. I don't doubt that they would consider it because the stupidity and all this is difficult to fathom. But that's what I was going to lead to is if you're an Afghan government policymaker and the U.S. is considering giving the Taliban these fighters back, that you're holding to come get you. I mean, what is the point of that? I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's really stupid. I mean, one of the things that we had speculated a while ago, and obviously the Afghan government has many problems. It's obviously highly dependent on foreign aid, including American aid. But at some point here, what you realize is going to happen is if you're an Afghan decision maker, you should have realized the U.S. is slow motion process of throwing you under the bus, of pretending that you are the problem here in terms of making peace when the Taliban's coming for your head. And what I would say if I were in the Afghan government is, look, at some point you got to say, yeah, you're not on our side anymore. You're leaving. You are repeating Taliban apology at talking points, even as they're coming for us. I'm not going to give them more fighters to come kill me and my family, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And, if you're an Afghan decision maker, you got to say, look, this is it. The final battle is coming, and for the future of Afghanistan. And I don't know why, if you're an Afghan at this point, I mean, obviously it's easy for me to say. I'm sitting here in New York. I'm not sitting in Kabul. I don't have any blood in the game. It's easy. But by the same token, just from a pure game theoretical, logical standpoint of looking at it, I don't know why, if you're in the Afghan government, you would play along with this, right? I don't know why you would, if you're just making a decision from a self-preservation standpoint, and the U.S. is throwing you under the bus in slow motion, forget it.
Yeah, I could provide a little bit of insight. I recently spoke to an Afghan ambassador to a foreign country, and look, he believes the U.S. military has our back. We're not going to. We've committed to not letting the return of the Taliban. We fear the return of Al Qaeda, which, of course, you and I have documented. Al Qaeda's never left, let alone, so the return is
that was on my list. My list here. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. I'm just communicating what he's saying here, and there, so there's that sort of that eternal hopefulness, and we've been there 20 years. Why would we leave now? Well, ask the South Vietnamese that question. So, you have that, I call this, the Afghans can't get off the American crack of support. But that withdrawal process is going to be happening pretty soon. And part of it is, and I think this is the corruption angle, right? There's a lot of money flowing into a lot of pockets. And, that's the other part of the American crack, the cash crack, right? There's the support crack cocaine, and then there's the cash crack cocaine, where it's a boondoggle while the Americans keep pumping in money to the Afghan security forces and the Afghan economy and reconstruction and other, it's to just hope we could keep that going as long, make the Americans happy, keep the Americans happy, and it's going to keep coming until it's not. So, I think it's going to be very interesting when when the aid starts decreasing, but particularly when the U.S. military support ends. That's, I think the reality is going to hit pretty hard, and you're going to see some pretty significant withdrawal symptoms from the large segments of the Afghan elite. And, the reality is those Afghan elite that's been keeping this sort of bizarre process going, they're not going to be the ones that pay the price. They're not going to be swinging from, you're not going to see Ghani and Abdullah and senior members of parliament and the defense. They're not going to be swinging from lampposts in Kabul. It's going to be the district governor. It's going to be the deputy police chief. It's going to be the administrator in the interior of the Ministry of Interior, and, guys that have been, the functionaries and on the front lines in the fight against the Taliban. Those are the ones going to pay the real price. I mean, I have no sympathy for Ghani or Abdul or individuals, Karzai, number one on the list. Individuals like that who profited significantly while refusing to unite their country. And it's the guys that have been men and women who've been on the front lines of this fight against the Taliban. They're going to pay the real price. That's where my sympathy lies.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things. One, I mean, I guess in terms of the eternal hopefulness, I mean, I guess, DOD sends mixed messages when they're issuing contracts, of course, to contractors and re-upping and that sort of thing. But, and and there's, as you said, there's a lot of heavy military hardware that hasn't been removed yet. But I think if you're a decision maker on the Afghan side, you still got to look at the political rhetoric in the U.S., where you now have had 3 administrations now in a row where the president has said, look, I don't want to be there. You had Obama claiming to run. He claimed to bring a responsible end to the war in Iraq. He didn't, but then he said he was going to do the same thing in Afghanistan. He just sort of, backed off at the last second from a complete withdrawal. You had Trump endorse a plan for this sort of mini, I don't want to call it surge. People call it a surge. It's really sort of a mini increase in forces to try and stand up the Afghan government one last time in 2017. He then begged off that by 2018 and was in full on, endless wars rhetoric mode after that from 2018 on. And you have President Biden coming in. He's just saying, look, I can't imagine being there next year. Looking at all that, if I'm an Afghan decision maker, I would say, look, you're telling us you're not going to be here next year. You don't want to be here next year. Why am I going to give the Taliban 7,000 guys back, many of whom will probably rejoin the fight to come get me, So I think what I'm saying is, if I was a decision maker sitting in their shoes, the way I'd be thinking about this is, look, the Helm's Deep moment is probably coming, and there ain't no Gandalf coming over the hill, right? Over the mountain, right? So, I gotta think about how I want to fight this out and look at it from that perspective. I don't know that they have that type of clarity at this point. Probably they don't, but just looking at it from that perspective, from a outsider's perspective, all this is very strange. But you mentioned...
Tom, I agree with you completely. I mean, that is completely the logical and rational way to approach it. I mean, and I'm just going to make one quick comment. You mentioned the Obama surge. I call it in my head a pseudo.
The Trump surge, the Trump mini surge, 2017.
Oh, the Trump surge too. I was thinking of that. I mean, they both were pseudo surges, right? They were limited in scope and in.
Well, Obama
mission.
at least put significant forces in Afghanistan.
Sure, but he handcuffed himself
by the timeline. But my point is, on calling the Trump didn't do what Obama did in terms of even the number of forces. I mean, it wasn't.
It was a bump.
Yeah, it was a small increase, and so, but whatever. And you can criticize that decision now all you want, especially since there was obviously no sustainability there at all either. But okay, so you look at all this. As I said, you got to, if you're looking at this from the Afghan perspective, you got to think your Helm's Deep moment's probably coming. We noticed there was another New York Times account recently. That was talking about how U.S. intelligence officials were trying to sway Biden on the U.S. presence there. I'm not sure exactly, for how long, but they were trying to sway Biden on the presence there. And one of the things that I noticed in the report was they said, you teased this already, Bill, that Al-Qaeda will come back. Right? And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, what do you think is going on now? Right? I mean, if you've not been paying attention, you just wrote up, there was a guy from Tajikistan, Al-Qaeda commander from, AQIS who's working with the Taliban, was just killed. We've documented, I mean, I'm sick of writing it up, to be frank, right? Because there's so many of these guys pop up on the radar. There's so many times instances of Al-Qaeda guys being hunted down in Afghanistan. The truth is, and we're not going to go on and on about this again. The truth is that nobody really knows what the extent of Al-Qaeda's footprint is in Afghanistan, but it's not zero. It's not a matter of returning. It's, to my mind, it's just a matter of whether or not they have their sort of, start celebrating it openly that they've been there the whole time, right? So that's basically what it is.
Yeah, Tom, and I mean that's it, right? It's Al-Qaeda's kept a low profile. Look, this commander, he was killed alongside a Taliban leader. They were plotting major attacks. They killed in an area
capitals, right? Provincial capitals.
Yep, right. Yep, and killed in an area run by the Haqqanis. Obviously, they're Al-Qaeda. The ties between the Haqqanis and Al-Qaeda run deep, and the Haqqanis, of course, are an integral part of the Taliban network. Sirajuddin Haqqani, the head of the Haqqani network, is also a deputy emir, probably the most influential Taliban leader now in Afghanistan. And, there's another report out that kind of went under the radar that the Al-Qaeda is running camps in Dishut district in Helmand province. Well, guess what, Tom? I went back.
Shocking.
You and I reported.
Shocking, yeah.
Baram Shah, right? We reported this in 2015. Those camps have been running for quite some time. They haven't gone anywhere. This is where Tom and we could go over, Al-Qaeda leader after Al-Qaeda leader killed, and Al-Qaeda camps being targeted and destroyed and whatnot. They haven't gone anywhere, folks. The UN estimates 400 to 600 Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. That's probably a reasonable estimate. It could be double that. It could be triple that.
I don't even think it is a reasonable estimate, to be honest with you. I think it's probably much higher than that. But yeah, I mean, because you got to think about the Pakistani Taliban. You got to think about they've got their hooks into all. Simultaneously, they'll say they're potentially hundreds to low thousands of Pakistani Taliban jihadis there too. Something like that. I mean.
Oh, the UN estimated 66,000 to 6,500 of them.
Pakistanis, yes. Right? But then only a certain number of those are Pakistani Taliban. But the point is that I don't think anybody has any idea what the real number is. Since we documented this before in the past.
We just know it's more than that stupid 200 estimate that we've seen floating out there. There's just,
I mean, nobody really knows. I mean, but the point is that there's never been, one of the things I recently did a lecture online with some students, and I talked about the epistemological problems in studying Al-Qaeda. And this is one of the biggest ones, right? I mean, is that it doesn't matter what data comes up or what examples come up. These models they're very rarely updated for understanding any of this. And this is part of telling the story of a lost war, is that the U.S. didn't even really understand what they were fighting throughout much of the war. It's a very tough thing to explain to people, especially since so many people have died and been maimed in this war. And yet, the cluelessness a lot of times has been, overwhelming. And so in any event, I think we're going to find out, after the U.S. presumably withdraws here in the coming months, we'll find out what Al-Qaeda will be very happy to turn on the propaganda spigot, started advertising what they're doing. Of course, ISIS is still there, and they have a branch too that is capable of mass terrorist attacks. They've lost some steam, of course, but they're still still in the game. But speaking about ISIS, Bill, just transition to this here. Obviously, the ISIS group in Mozambique has made gains in recent weeks, seizing territory. And you and I both had the same thought, right? Because to cite another New York Times report, there was a report saying that a small group of U.S. military trainers is in Mozambique. And what's the thought we both had, Bill, on this?
Yeah. Why? If we're ending these endless wars, if we want to disengage, why are we engaging in places like Mozambique? What is the point?
While wigging out of Afghanistan. While doing everything U.S. can to get out of Afghanistan and whitewashing the Taliban, which is where this all started. And now we're getting involved, and the U.S. is getting involved in Mozambique? I mean, what?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, and look, Tom, I think some of this is the shine of the Islamic State hasn't worn off, right? They became the shiny new toy in 2014, and everyone, the reporting on Al Qaeda just pretty much dried up, and it became it's been eclipsed by the Islamic State, which you and I know is absolutely wrong. Certainly, big competitor to Al Qaeda and the Islamic State. The Islamic State was a big competitor to Al Qaeda, and in some areas dominated, particularly in Iraq and Syria, and in some areas in Africa. The Islamic State became the predominant organization, but Al Qaeda has maintained significant. But anyway, again, why are we getting involved in Mozambique if this war is over? If we are ending the endless wars, why are we re-engaging? And keep in mind, Tom and I strongly disagree with that end the endless wars or end the forever wars narrative. Our disengagement doesn't end these wars. As Tom has, I won't steal your catchphrase. Tom has said numerous times, it's an endless jihad, not an endless war.
Yeah, but I mean, it's curious to see. I mean, obviously, it's only a small footprint going into Mozambique, but still, it raises a question. And again, I think part of where we agree with the critiques of all this, and we have plenty of our own criticisms as well, is that you see there's this disjunct between the political rhetoric, and then you see the U.S. is still, active in different places. There's no ability, there's no willingness to articulate to the American people why the U.S. military is doing any of this at a political level, and that's the problem, right? I mean, you can't just have this stuff be on autopilot or do this, and not explain to people why you're doing it and what the necessity of it is. And the other thing about it is you just got to be careful about mission creep, which you've talked about a lot, Bill. The mission creep in these different areas. Somalia was a good example where that presence, look, Shabab is part of Al Qaeda. It's an Al Qaeda branch. There's all sorts of disconnected dots nonsense on that, which we've rebutted through the years. But the U.S. presence in Somalia sort of crept up over time, to several hundred troops from a smaller footprint. And there wasn't a lot of debate or discussion politically over why the U.S. was doing that. And that is a problem. We've said that's a problem. So I just think looking at all this, we saw, the Mozambique is not a big story. According to what we know, there's only a small footprint there of trainers, but it's one of those things where you look at it and on its face, it's a little jarring to see the U.S. desperate to get out of Afghanistan after all these years and after failing there in many ways. And then now we're going to sort of shift any amount of resources to Mozambique. It just doesn't mean that isn't an ISIS group. You and I don't play the disconnect the dots on that group. Some people do. But we do think that's part of ISIS as well. But it's still jarring to see the U.S. putting any kind of amount of effort into that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, should the U.S. send advisors to help the Mozambique military fight ISIS? I think this is a smart use of resources. Absolutely. If they can help fight the Islamic State while not engaging militarily, even if we did do that, I wouldn't think that was a bad idea. However, again, this is where our actions and our rhetoric don't line up. And that's what's so disconcerting to Tom and I. That's why we're just confused about all this. We're told the endless wars are ending. We're pivoting to China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet we're engaging in new countries. Well, why are we engaging in new countries?
Yeah,
Because
I wouldn't say I'm confused about it. I just say I think the political...
No, yes, Tom.
The political class is confused about it.
Yeah, when I use confused, we know what's going on. It's just why isn't our political class being clear about this? And it's just bizarre to watch this rhetoric of we're stopping our involvement. Thomas, you noted numerous times our footprint in Africa and the Middle East and in South Asia is minuscule compared to what we have in the Pacific region or compared to what we have in Europe.
Indo-Pacific Command has more than 4 times the personnel of any other combatant command, according to DoD. And so that includes CENTCOM, which oversees all these, the 9/11, what we call the 9/11 wars across the Middle East, and also more than 4 times as many as AFRICOM, which of course oversees presence there. Look, that said, I mean, and the reason why I note that is because I think that a lot of times the debate about this stuff is unhinged from that reality. It's unhinged, you want to debate whether or not the U.S. should be in any of these places. Fine, like I've said, and I still say, I don't know enough about Mozambique to say that I would even put any trainers in there. To be quite frank, I don't know that I would authorize that if I had the power to do so. I just think it's still jarring that anything is going on there. But my point is that you hear from defense circles, you hear this idea that we need to pivot away from all this in order to support this looming prospective confrontation with China, which I would have misgivings about that for many reasons as well. But my point is, as a resource allocation argument, that doesn't hold water. I mean, you're not going to tell me that 25 to 3,500 troops in Afghanistan. We saw the reporting that we don't even know how many.
Yeah, right.
In Afghanistan. I mean, good lord.
Thanks for the being honest about that, U.S. military.
Yeah, and then still a small footprint in Iraq and Syria. You can debate the merits of having a footprint all you want, but don't tell me that gets in the way of great power competition with China. I mean, that's ridiculous, And I think if you look at the budgets, the military budgets, one of the things I want to do at some point, we're going to do an episode on military spending. I think you and I have to do an episode on that.
Sure.
We kind of come at this a little bit differently than a lot of people, but we think there's a lot of criticism to be had, and there are a lot of valid critiques about how the military spends money, And one of the things is that you hear them say, well, they've been spending all this money on the 9/11 wars, they will spend on other things. And I'm going to tease our conclusion, but I've looked at the budgets, or at least reporting on the budgets, and that it's been a long time since these conflicts have really eaten up the DoD budget. Doesn't make sense to me.
A decade, Tom. I mean, really, it's such a,
Meanwhile, they're blowing money on
fallacious argument.
Blowing money on the F-35 and God knows what else. I mean, we'll get
stop teasing, Tom. Stop teasing.
Yeah, we'll stop teasing. But yeah. But I don't know. Do you have anything else for this short, abbreviated episode, Bill? Before we go.
No, I think that's it. I'm glad we hit the Mozambique issue. I think that's a really important one. And, I want to just reiterate that look, if I had the decision, I think that's a wise use. I think we recognize that Islamic State Central Africa province is a growing and probably one of the most prolific Islamic State branches. It's something we should be concerned about, the spread. And if we can do small things like sending 20 trainers to help that, we should do it, but we shouldn't put it in this crazy context of prolonging endless wars and other nonsense like that. But I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'll give you one more point on that. I saw some ISIS fanboys celebrating the gains in Mozambique, and they were reusing the old ISIS phrase, remaining and expanding. And I thought, geez, just as much as our political rhetoric is all screwed up about this, and there's no understanding of what the U.S. has been doing post 9/11, really, or there's a lot of debate, but there's a lot of misunderstanding too. These guys are also confused about it too, because the idea that you didn't, the first part of that, the remaining, you didn't do, guys, right?
Yeah.
The remaining part of your caliphate, didn't happen, right? Now maybe you're expanding right now in Mozambique, but
contracted in Iraq and Syria.
You contracted in a lot of places, and it's not exactly like you can claim this is remaining and expanding. So at least their rhetoric is screwed up just as much as ours is. I guess we'll leave it there.
It's well-meaning screwed up. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I wouldn't give them that, but I don't know what that means even. But all right. Well, thank you to our listeners for tuning in again to this week's episode of Generation Jihad. Sorry about the delay in getting episode 46 out. We got more coming. please do subscribe to the show. As a reminder, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. And we will see you again next week. And I mean that. We're actually going to see you.